Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Run is here, everyone, and it is time for war. I'm joined today by my lawyer friend and your lawyer friend as well, Zach Morgan. How's it going?
Good, buddy. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
And if you're looking to make my lawyer friend your lawyer friend, jump over to Zach's YouTube channel called Your Lawyer Friend Zach. You see what we did there? Very clever.
I like it.
Okay, we have to revisit the issue that we were talking about yesterday because there's some more questions that I have for everyone joining us that doesn't know what we're talking about right now. Danny Masterson is a Scientologist who was found guilty of violently assaulting in a particular way. There's only so much I can say less than a minute into a YouTube video. Danny Masterson is an actor, a Scientologist, who was found guilty of assaulting two fellow Scientologist women. He was charged with a third. There's honestly about 8 or 9 women who've come forward saying that they've been victims of Danny Masterson. On September 7th, he was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. About 5 years ago, the Jane Does in this case filed what I'm just gonna summarize as a harassment lawsuit, a stalking, fair game, and harassment lawsuit against Danny Masterson, David Miscavige, the Church of Scientology, for basically the harassment they were subjected to since coming forward and agreeing to cooperate in the reopening of, since this case was reopened. That law, now that the criminal case is over, now that Danny's in prison, this civil lawsuit that I believe was filed about 5 years ago is back underway. And new complaints have just been added to this lawsuit. Civil RICO complaints have been added to this lawsuit, and complaints specifically about the attacks that Danny was found guilty of. Specific complaints relating to those attacks have now been added to the lawsuit. For a number of the victims, but not all of them. Okay. One of the biggest hurdles that Scientologists suing Scientology encounter is that all members are required to sign general releases that include an arbitration clause agreeing to never sue Scientology for any reason, to take any dispute to internal Scientology arbitration. Almost every Scientology civil lawsuit, Scientologist suing Scientology, gets thrown out of the courts and into internal arbitration for this very reason. In this civil lawsuit, which is Bixler versus Scientology et al., or Bixler versus David Miscavige et al., Scientology argued that this should go to internal arbitration. At first, a judge agreed and threw the case into arbitration. They appealed. The appeal went in the favor of the plaintiffs, and they said, look, this lawsuit is about activity that occurred after everyone involved left Scientology, after the women left Scientology. They're suing for the harassment they were subjected to after they left Scientology. They do not have to do an internal religious arbitration. Okay. Now that the civil RICO has been added, now that complaints about the attacks themselves have been added, you and I were having a chat last night, and I said, look, does this new amended complaint open the door to Scientology trying to relitigate the arbitration issue? Does it open the door for them to once again try to get this entire lawsuit thrown into internal religious arbitration? Last night in our chat, you were leaning towards no, and I want to pose the question to you in a different way.
Okay.
Because the specific reason that the plaintiffs won their appeal regarding the arbitration was specifically because the judge said this lawsuit is about activity that occurred after all the parties left Scientology. You do not continue to have power over them with this internal religious arbitration. But the problem is that the complaints that have been added about the attacks themselves, I think we're 4.5 minutes into the video. I think it's safe we can say the rapes. The complaints that have been added to the lawsuit about the rapes themselves, the rapes occurred when the members were still in Scientology. Now, not everyone who is a plaintiff in this lawsuit was ever a Scientologist. By the way, in addition to the civil RICO being added, in addition to complaints about the rapes being added, new plaintiffs have been added. And with the new plaintiffs, right now, if you take all the plaintiffs right now, we're about 50% we're in Scientology, 50% we're not. Now, the fact that they're adding complaints to the lawsuit that occurred when some of the plaintiffs were in Scientology, to me, as a layman, seems to open the door to Scientology trying to get the entire thing, all of the parties or some of the parties, thrown into religious arbitration. And I just want to get your thoughts on this subject of why that may happen or why that may not happen.
Sure. So I think the thing we need to do is we need to take this. So to begin, I'll be the first one to admit this is an incredibly complicated case as a litigator, both as a plaintiff's attorney and as a defense attorney. Certainly from the judge's perspective, it's incredibly complex. A bunch of different people making claims. Some are similar, some aren't. Multiple claims against multiple people. Some are the same, some aren't. It's incredibly complicated, which is, sort of the nature of litigation sometimes. But what we do is we take each one of these allegations, all of the allegations made by Jane Doe 1, all of the allegations by Jane Doe 2, etc. And in theory, each one of those is its own lawsuit. But the court system is set up that if I have the same plaintiff versus the same defendant or defendants, I sue them one time and I lay all of my allegations on the table. And now so now we have multiple plaintiffs with similar claims, some with extra claims, and basically the same set of defendants. Some are defendants in all the cases and some are only defendants in some of the cases. But ultimately, each one of these claims is essentially its own lawsuit, but we've put all of the teams on the same floor and we're going to play the ball game one time instead of 50 times. That's essentially what's happened here. Now, the rape allegations involve only Danny Masterson. As I've read the pleadings, they don't implicate, at the time of the acts, the late 90s, early 2000s, they don't implicate the church at all. So that means that even the Jane Does who were in Scientology at the time should not be subject to arbitration because Danny Masterson is not the organization. He's simply a practitioner of the faith. Likewise, if I am a member of a different religion, and a member, a parishioner, a person who attends that religious service does to me what Danny did to those women, that doesn't give me grounds to sue the church. It gives me grounds to sue the person who did it.
Right.
Right. So then you have this second claim, the RICO stuff that we talked about last night. All of the allegations in the RICO case essentially assert that not only did Danny stalk and harass, but he sort of spearheaded or was part of an effort organized by the greater organization that is the various entities of the religion to stalk and harass these women. All of those allegations are made beginning after those who were in Scientology left. And based on the appellate court ruling, that's all also not subject to arbitration because these allegations begin after they separated from the church, and the arbitration clause is only in effect while you were in the church.
Right.
So if we break these down sort of one at a time, it's fairly simple. Where it gets complicated is when we take 50 or 60, in this case, probably 100 or more claims. If you were to actually flesh each claim out individually, there's thousands of elements that have to be proven. And now we've got this mesh that's sort of woven together. And if one or more of the parties wanted to be bifurcated, meaning separated out of the mess and tried their case separately, they have the right to do that. Where it gets tricky is for the judge deciding what parts of the giant lawsuit can be spun off into their own and what parts have to stay part of the giant lawsuit. But that's, I mean, in the attorneys, if it got to that point, the attorneys would go and make their arguments and find the law that supports their position and then brief it to the judge. But I think that's sort of we're on step 5. That's sort of a step 50 analysis, I think.
Right. Now, you mentioned that the complaints that have been added to the lawsuit specific to the act of rape itself, that Scientology, the Church of Scientology, Religious Technology Center, David Miscavige are not implicated in those complaints. And I wondered if, because those are the new complaints, the pre-existing complaints was about the stalking and the harassment and the fair game. And what's interesting is that the plaintiffs' team, the plaintiffs, plural possessive, their team, argued for those pre-existing complaints that Danny was acting as an agent of Scientology. And I wondered if Scientology might use the fact that they had previously made that argument to try and get the complaints about the rape pulled into internal arbitration, even though the language of the complaint doesn't seem to implicate Scientology itself.
Yeah. So,
A-
you know, I think it's certainly possible. It's certainly an argument that if I'm the attorney there, I have to make. It's arguably malpractice if I don't. Because if I have a good faith basis, and to be honest, it's not hard for a lawyer to find a good faith basis to plead anything. I think the law, though, as it was handed down by the appellate court in California, is pretty clear. Even if he was an agent of Scientology on the harassment and stalking claims, even if he was an agent of theirs, the victims, the plaintiffs, had already separated from the church, who were no longer a member of the church and therefore not subject to the arbitration clause. That would be no different than harassing just Joe Sixpack on a street corner. He has no material connection at that point.
Right. And I know I asked this question last night, and you might have already somewhat spoken to this
I'll answer
a few minutes ago. I just have such a hard time wrapping my mind around the fact that we're taking a whole group of plaintiffs who have different legal teams, who are suing for different causes of action for different periods of time to different parties. And in some periods of time, Danny was acting as an agent of Scientology. In the earlier period of time, he wasn't. Half the defendants have arbitration clauses, arbitration agreements signed. Half of them don't. If I'm a judge, I just feel like I'm sitting here going, why is this all one lawsuit?
And I think that's a fair question. And I sort of pondered overnight and then into today how best to explain this. And it's, if we get rid of everything, so if we take it all the way back down to the base allegations, every one of these Jane Does has a common allegation. Right? They all share at least one allegation with one another. And I think that's the harassment and stalking, right? They all share that common allegation with every other plaintiff in the case, right?
I believe that is true.
So that's how we get everybody in the courtroom at the same time. We all have this same allegation. But the law says if I have an allegation against Danny Masterson and these various religious entities, I have the right to have that tried, and all these plaintiffs come together, because now we don't have to present the same witness 5 times. I can present the witness one time and he can answer to all the allegations. But then if it just so happens that I have additional beef with this same set of defendants, since I'm in the courtroom, the law says I have to go ahead and plead those while I'm here. So if you go back, they all share a common allegation of stalking and harassment. And then some of them have RICO, some of them have rape, some of them have this, some of them have that. A lot of them have in common, but they all share at least one common allegation. And so the court says, well, let's just resolve all of those common allegations at once. Oh, but there's also these other allegations that are related to this same defendant or defendants. So, and we're already in the courtroom. They're already here to answer to the lawsuit. Let's just put the cards on the table right now. And it all has to do with judicial efficiency and judicial expediency. I mean, imagine how long we're 5 years into this already. And according to the face of the second amended complaint, it's got a trial date of 2025, and that's subject to move if one or more of the parties show that they have a good faith basis to move trial.
Right.
I would suspect that 2025 is probably far enough out for that trial date to be solid, but there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that clears it up at all, if that makes it any more clear than it was before. But essentially, if you look at it, every plaintiff shares that same stalking and harassment claim. They all have that in common. Some of them have other things in common, some of them don't, but they all share that same common allegation. That's where the court starts. And then the court says, oh, by the way, essentially the law says, by the way, now that we have you plaintiff and you defendants in the same room, plaintiffs, do you have additional beef with these defendants? Yes, Judge, I do. Cool. Go ahead and plead it. Let's get everybody on notice. We're already here. Let's gather all the evidence. Let's try it all at once.
Right. I have a new piece of information I want to share with you about
Sure.
this. Real quick, if you're watching live right now, do us a favor and hit that like button. It seems to help send notifications out to people who aren't getting them. Okay, so I made an inquiry because I couldn't understand why all of the additional complaints were made regarding the act of rape itself. And I inquired about this. And because, by the way, remember, we're dealing with Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3. That's who Danny was charged with. There's Jane Doe 4, who identified herself as Trish Vesey, actress Trish Vesey. She testified in the first trial, not the second trial. There's another woman named Bobette Realis, who's identified herself. She did not testify in either trial, but she did appear in an episode of Leah Remini Scientology in the Aftermath talking about having been attacked by Danny. So right now, who we're dealing with, to my recollection, is Jane Doe 1, 2, 3, 4, and Bobette Realis. So that's five women. All of the women, except for Jane Doe 1, added a complaint to the lawsuit about rape. And I thought to myself, how are these other women who Danny was not found guilty of attacking able to file this lawsuit, file those complaints in this lawsuit? And why now? And why not Jane Doe 1? And to the best of my understanding, the answer is this. California recently had a look back period that was ending in 2 days, where people who'd been victims of violent sexual crimes that was past the statute of limitations could file a lawsuit. But the deadline is the end of this year. And because Danny was found guilty of his attacks on Jane Doe 1 and 2, Jane Doe 1 and 2 technically have 12 months from the day he was found guilty to file a civil lawsuit on the rape charges.
Correct.
The other women do not. The other women had a deadline of December 31st, 2023. And that is why we saw those complaints added to the lawsuit now. For women Danny was not convicted of a crime against. Okay.
Yeah. And see that makes sense to me that would be the case. And I will also tell you that because he was convicted of 2 of these allegations, 2 of these criminal charges, by act of law, the 2 victims whose cases were adjudicated guilty, and that's the reason Danny Masterson is now in the California Department of Corrections with that beautiful photograph you shared with the world, by the way. What an outstanding way to go down in style, I might add. That's going to be very easy for them to prove, because if there's a criminal conviction of the higher burden of proof that you're guilty beyond reasonable doubt, essentially it's slightly more complicated than this, but it's essentially, I submit to the court the jury verdict. The court instructs the civil jury, Danny Masterson did this thing. Now all you have to do is determine what is the monetary value of that. And by virtue of doing that, these other victims who've raised similar allegations but were not represented by the state in the criminal trial, or who did not have a conviction secured, they're able to put him on the stand, ask those same questions, or they can rely on the transcript from the criminal trial where this evidence was submitted. So proving that's actually going to be fairly simple, I think.
You know what? What you just said makes so much common sense. It actually hadn't even dawned on me that it should really be that simple.
For the most part, it is. It may be slightly
incredible.
different in California, but the general rule is, yeah, if there's a criminal conviction, then I can admit into evidence the conviction where a jury, because remember, in the civil case, it's just more likely than not preponderance of the evidence.
Right.
If a jury determined by beyond reasonable doubt you did this thing, if it's good enough in the criminal case, it's good enough in the civil case. And the judge will instruct the jury, as a matter of law, as the judge, I am telling you, Danny Masterson did this. The only thing you must consider is, how much is that worth to the victims?
Right. So Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2, it would seem the civil case would be an absolute slam dunk. For the other Jane Does or the other plaintiffs, it would certainly be an easier case to prove than the criminal case. Slam dunk might be an exaggeration.
Yeah, but they're going to have access to all of the state's evidence, because the evidence that was admitted at trial is public evidence. They'll be able to use all the state's evidence. They'll have access to the trial transcripts. They'll be able to call the same witnesses. And if a witness says, oh, well, that's not what happened, you say, okay, did you lie in the criminal case or are you lying now? And the jury doesn't care what the answer is. The jury hears, you're a liar. I'm going to believe the victims. That's what the jury hears.
Amazing. Is it normal for litigation to be this complex? I mean, is this unusual? Like you saw the second amended complaint, right. You see all the parties, you see all the causes of action. Is this normal?
I don't know that it's normal. It's certainly not normal in the traditional sense. Where we tend to see litigation complex like this is traditionally in one of two ways: class action lawsuits, right, where everybody's exposed to mesothelioma or to asbestos, or everybody took the same diet pill and got the same disease. Okay. Or we see where A sues B and B says, well, I acted on behalf of C, or C sold the product, not me. So then B sues C. So C countersues A, cross sues A. So that's typically where we see it. We don't tend to see just a whole bunch of A's versus a whole bunch of B's, but we can get it. We tend to see it in other fashions. But yeah, the rules of the rules of procedure actually anticipate this in the way they read about indispensable parties, cross claims, counterclaims, third party claims. So the rules of procedure actually Congress anticipated this in the various state legislatures when they adopted the civil rules of procedure.
Right. Okay. I've got some comments here, a number of comments here that I'd like us to take up. There was one right here that I just saw. Where is it? Okay. Nicole just got here. Please tell me the RICO charges are for real. There's so many questions about this in the comments section of our video last night. Help everyone understand. Most people seem to think RICO is only a criminal charge. Why are we talking about it in a civil case?
Because the state of California and many other states have decided that it is a violation of the civil law, not the criminal law, the civil law, to behave in a manner where you work in concert with others to perpetrate a crime. The criminal law does exist, and essentially the only material difference between the criminal law and the civil law is the burden of proof. The plaintiffs only have to prove more likely than not that it was a concerted effort with a common nexus of crimes in the predicate crimes, as opposed to beyond reasonable doubt. And second, in the criminal case, the worst penalty is you go to prison. In the civil case, the worst penalty is they owe you more money than they could ever possibly pay. So those are the only two material differences: the burden of proof and the damages.
Amazing.
And that's not new. I mean, it's new, I guess, in the RICO sense. But for years, under our system of justice, every crime has had a civil counterpart. If I get drunk and drive a car and hit your car, I'm going to go to jail for DUI. But you also have the right to sue me for negligence and possibly intentional torts because I damaged your property and possibly injured you. You've always had that recourse. We just don't ever think about it like that. If I punch you in the nose, I can be arrested for battery, and then you can sue me for battery.
That makes sense. Okay. Let's see. Dina Bobina. Have you considered Danny could be hiding his gun because it was used in the commission of another crime, ballistics? That's certainly always been one of the speculations. It seems to me that if that is what was going on, you would rather the gun be destroyed, not just hidden somewhere.
Yeah, and I like the ballistics comment there too. The only thing to keep in mind is the allegation that he used the gun in the criminal case was not that he discharged, but rather that he showed it. So it's possible that he showed it to a half a dozen different victims, but if a round was never discharged and gathered as evidence, it'd be hard to tie it. But yeah, I think you're right in the thought there.
I will say this. I will not be shocked if we see a search warrant for Ashton Kutcher's house. Ashton Kutcher made a tweet a number of years ago about his friend gifting him a weapon in the parking lot of like a diner in Tennessee. I probably got 3 of those facts wrong just now, but I'm telling you.
And by the way, if you delete social media posts, they're still there. The government can and will subpoena the Twitter servers if necessary.
Yes. Good friend of the channel, good friend of mine, Tommy Scoville, said that when he was going through his incarceration, There was just one little tiny firearm that was missing. And the authorities searched his friends' homes. Like, because I heard someone make an objection to the idea that search warrants were just going to be drawn up for any property Danny has had, any property his family members has, any properties his friends have. And the objection was, oh, they can't show probable cause for all of that. The judge has already ruled probable cause. The judge has already ruled there's probable cause to execute these search warrants. And my understanding is that the deputy DA has pretty wide latitude on what addresses he can request to be searched. So I'm expecting Danny's house to be searched. I'm expecting Jordan Masterson, Alana Masterson, Chris Masterson, Carol Masterson, Ashton Kutcher, Mike Shupin.
I would check the house of Danny's gardener, his plumber, his electrician, the guy who cut his hair, who apparently didn't do a very good job according to the prison photo. I mean, anybody who's had remote contact with him is subject to a search warrant. The probable cause burden is not very high. It's easy to get probable cause.
And the Scientology Celebrity Center.
Yeah, do it. Ask for
the Scientology Celebrity President's, the Scientology Celebrity Center President's Office is the first place that Danny and his crew went after the commission of the crime against Jane Doe 1. And it just so happens that's the weapon that's missing. I'm just saying, David Miscavige might be getting, well, David Miscavige doesn't have an office there, but the Celebrity Center might be getting a search warrant looking for Danny's missing weapon. That's speculation. That's just a little bit of fun speculation. That's much less likely than Ashton Kutcher, all of Danny's family members, and his closest friends.
I will tell you that the search warrant, when it's issued, will allow the law enforcement to search any space large enough to contain that weapon. It was a small weapon, which means they're going to be emptying desk drawers. If they say, "Oh, well, that's COB's office and he's not here," it doesn't matter. Open the door. We have the right to search. If there's nothing there, we'll move on. And they will dump drawers and they don't put them back together. They just walk out.
Oh, I love it. It makes my heart warm just thinking about it. I tell you what, whoever's got that weapon better fork it over. But it might be too late. Honestly, it might be too late. I think we could expect to see search warrants authorized as soon as the first week of January. By the end of the first week of January is my guess. Okay, let's see. Mousy asks, what's happening with the grand jury investigation? Still underway, folks. Still underway. We thought 2023 was bad for Scientology. Just wait for 2024.
Yeah, grand jury investigations are by their nature a secret. So the fact that a grand jury investigation is ongoing was revealed by Deputy DA Reinhold Mueller for the purposes of a specific issue the judge was considering. So it was made on the record, but the actual proceedings themselves are secret. When they meet, the witnesses that are called, all of that is secret. So the grand jury investigation will be over when there's either a no true bill returned, meaning we don't find probable cause and we're not going to issue a charging document, or the actual indictment itself is prepared, unsealed, and then it lists the people who've been charged with the crime.
And the fact that we have already seen how good and skilled and competent and knowledgeable Deputy DA Reinhold Mueller is on the subject of Scientology and how they work and all this kind of stuff. And the fact that Reinhold Mueller is, by all reports, the head of this grand jury investigation, bad news for David Miscavige and Scientology. Bad news. I just warms my heart. Okay, Renee L. How many women in the civil case have accused Danny of SA? At the risk of undercounting, we have Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and Bobette. That's 5. Now, Jane Doe 1 has not yet added, and we don't know that she will, but has not yet added SA to her complaint in the civil case. She has 10 more months to make up her mind on that. But I got to tell you, now that you've reminded me, jogged my memory on how easy a civil case should be to win after already having won the criminal proceeding, I wonder why she wouldn't want to do that. So we'll see. We'll see. Okay. Alicia Medley says, has Danny been declared? Alicia, the jury is still out on this one. Pun intended. There has been from my perspective, there's been no credible corroboration on Danny being declared a suppressive person. We haven't seen any evidence of his family disconnecting. It seems more likely that this is something Scientology is telling certain people to keep them happy, or it's true and it's just a secret they're keeping from everyone except for a few key people. Either way, Alicia, we just don't know yet. But from where I sit, I'm going to say this is unconfirmed. That's my answer. Okay, Squirrelentology. Love it. David Miscavige needs a matching orange jumpsuit. I feel you on that one. Okay, Trapped Musing, professional hiatus. Sorry, unrelated to the stream. How do you use your intro without copyright issues? Trapped Musing, I think it's because I took a segment and I chopped it up. Like, I didn't just take a 6-minute segment, a 6-second segment. That 6 seconds is so chopped up from the entire thing that I'm not even sure an algorithm would detect it as a copyright issue. That's just my guess. Otherwise, it's just kind of fair use, to be honest. Nobody could mistake my intro as a replacement for the original work. You know, that's my better guess. Okay, Trapped Musing said earlier, I commented on a previous stream about my new channel about narcissism and a nuclear family being a cult. The beginning didn't make sense and was meant to say it is not as important as your experience. Okay, I still am not totally sure I know what you're talking about, Trapped Musing, but you know what? Anyone's experience is as important as anyone else's experience. So if you've got a new channel, congratulations on that. And I wish you all the best of luck on that. That's very cool. Okay, let's see. Laura Waldy. Good evening, fellas. Hashtag retire Zach. Can you explain that hashtag to everyone who's asking about it?
Sure. So there's for those who are sort of my original followers on my channel, even before I got monetized. When I first got monetized, one of my followers, Gary Mack, he started the hashtag retire Zach. So I sort of made an offhand comment. I would love to be able to retire and just talk about law nerd and aviation nerd stuff with you guys all day long, but I have a day job I have to do. And so Gary started the hashtag retire Zach. And so the joke is the funds go to allow me to sit in front of the computer and hang out with you guys for a living instead of having to go to my old man job.
There you go. Okay, Christian B says, definitely search COB's office. And guys, COB means chairman of the board, which is what Scientologists call David Miscavige. Also a great idea to check the gardener, plumber, etc. places. Yes, and don't forget, Tom Cruise's duffel bag is where David Miscavige is most likely to be hiding. And the firearm might be there as well. I've always said it's either Tom Cruise's duffel bag or Joe Rogan's fanny pack. It's one or the other. It's got to be. It just feels right. All right, guys. Well, geez, we've already been going for a half hour. I didn't mean for this video to be that long, but I think we covered a lot of ground. Thank you once again, Zach, for your incredible knowledge and sharing it with us. And quick reminder to everybody, you can find Zach's YouTube channel at Your Lawyer Friend Zach. He's my friend. He can be your friend too.
There's a whole lot of me to go around, so come be friends.
All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us this evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Good night.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not,